Hi, welcome to Faith and Flavor. Hope your day is going well for you, or your night if it's night. We've been talking about things like purpose and grace, and His grace is sufficient, and um, how we are anchored through storms, and all of the themes that we've been going through. Um, Today, I want to talk about God's not finished yet. And so I know that, sometimes I'm almost 60 years old, right? Well, by the time you hear this podcast, I might be. Um,
I got you by a few years. That's okay.
but if we're, let's say, on this side of 60 or of 50, people who are 60 or 70, even people in their 30s or 40s, they may feel like, man, I'm getting older. What am I getting? I haven't accomplished this or I haven't accomplished that. Listen, I wrote my first book, children's book, and published it in 2019.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So I was 54, almost 54 years old when I published my first book. So actually, it was 2019 in December. So I was 54 years old when I published my first book. And I have so many more books in me that I do sometimes sit back and I'm like, God, I'm this old. How are all these books going to get out of me? Right? But if I understand that I'm thinking in my being, in my realm of thinking, is that 59 sounds old, but it's really not.
Right.
Especially if I look at Methuselah, who lived 969 years, when I see that people are still alive in the world today over 100, and people live into their 80s, what can we produce? But I will tell you this, if you don't start putting feet to your faith, you will not produce.
Correct.
You have to, I mean, listen, God's got word in people, but if they don't speak it out, it's literally just dormant word to society,
Right.
because it's just alive in you if you take it in, right? Um, we all have DNA. We all have stuff that we, like my characteristics come from my mother or my dad or whatever the case might be. Um, if we realize that our characteristics, spiritually speaking, come from the Father, and He didn't die until He said it is finished.
Right.
So if we're not striving and accomplishing, we're dead. We're dying. That should be the concept that a lot of people look at. I'm not finished because I'm not dead. I'm still alive. Whatever I'm going to do, one of my favorite scriptures, and I truthfully live by, I have two scriptures that I live by. One of them is, to him that know to do right and doeth it not, to him it is a sin. The second one is, whatever my hand findeth to do it with all of my might. And I really do try very hard to keep that scripture at the forefront of my thinking when I set out to do something. And I have people say, "Oh, how do you do all the stuff that you do?" And "Oh my goodness, that turned out so beautiful." That's because I really do take that scripture to heart, and I know that God's not finished with me. There's restoration when you fail, all this stuff like that we've talked about. But it doesn't matter where you're at in your life. If you're alive, you're not finished.
Well, too, you have to remember that the scripture that God gave to us a gift, and we use it, right? So I made what I consider a mistake one time. I was helping somebody, and a nurse said, "Well, she's just a volunteer." Well, I'm still serving a purpose for God, right? So you're not just anything, whatever God did you, even if it's, every job serves a purpose if you're doing it with Him in mind. You go and you do it to the fullest of, your potential.
Right. Well, I know that, even sometimes people might go to their local store, and I've heard stories where people have like, I walked in and I saw this, before I got inside, I saw this young girl crying or whatever. I might have told this story before, but I'll tell it again. I was driving home and I saw this girl out by the road, and she was like trying to run to something in the road. When I first saw her starting to approach the road, I thought she was going to check her mail. But I was aware of my surroundings. I saw this, she was probably about 18, 20 years old, and she was walking toward the road, and it's a busy, busy highway. It's our main highway that runs from one city to the next. And I saw her walking out there, and when I did, I was like, no, she's not stopped. In my head, I'm thinking she's not stopping at, oh, she's going to the road. Oh, wait, there's something in the road. And I'm a little ways down from what I could see, so I'm assuming it's an animal, but I couldn't see
Right.
what exactly, if something fell off of her car, whatever. But anyhow, as I approached it closer, I saw that it was her little dog. And in most people were just driving by watching this girl stand at the side of the road, and she literally was so panicked that she couldn't get to the dog, and it wasn't safe to get to the dog. And all these cars were just going around. They didn't have a thought probably in their mind about this poor young girl who was standing there looking at her little dog named Lucy. I found that out. But I drove past her when I realized it. I drove past her. I stopped. I pulled. I went to reverse, and I see an 18-wheeler coming, and I see that this girl is just so panicked. And I'm thinking, she's going to get hit. She's going to get hurt. I'm not going to get to her before she gets hit by this truck. Anyhow, long story short, she did finally get the little dog out of the road, and she just literally stood there in a panic. And most people know me. I mean, I don't mind to hug people, but I'm not this big touchy feely. I'm a little different maybe that way. Not that I mind a hug. It's just not that's not my first response
Yeah.
constantly, unless I see somebody hurting or somebody in pain. And so I went and I walked over to her. I said, "Are you okay?" And she literally just burst out. She was already tearing and crying, but she just literally burst out in tears. And I said, "Do you want a hug?" And I didn't have to ask her anything else. She literally fell in my arms. And most people get so, and I consoled her and made a phone call and got her family there. I waited for somebody and all that stuff. But really the point is we get so busy trying to just get through life that we don't realize that we're just running through life, and that we don't understand that we all have purpose. And whatever that purpose is, it's not finished. And if we are just trying to pay attention to where God's using us that day, like you said, it's for a purpose. You may
Right.
not see it in the moment, but who knows what that young girl, I've not ever talked to her again, I don't even know if I could still find her house. But I know one thing, she will probably always remember that somebody took the time
Right.
to stop and say, "Hey, that little dog's not here, but your heart mattered to me." And just stop. And I just let her hug me and just squall on me. Me, I'm like, "Ooh, germs," whatever.
And I think one of the saddest things about that is, in the moment we can't comprehend the fact that not everybody didn't stop. I mean, perhaps they didn't see or they're in a rush, but if we're so busy trying to do ABC 1, 2, 3, then and God could be sitting back going, I've given you so much potential. I've given you so much purpose. I need you to use it. And so in the mornings, I always say, God, will you speak to me and will you speak through me? I don't know what that's going to entail.
Right.
I have, and like I said, I use hospice a lot as an example because as a volunteer for hospice, I was told I would never make it because my first patient who passed away, I was hysterical. I mean, to the point where you would have thought it was my own family member. I was hysterical. And the pastor looked at me and he's like, you're not going to make it. Well, I've been volunteering for them for 25 years now. And, I always kind of made a joke like, I can't cook, I can't sew, I can't this, but he gave me that gift to be able to do. And when I can show up and I have to be careful because I am a hey sweetie, I am a hugger. But I make sure that the person's comfortable. I ask, but just to be able to use that instead of rushing, saying, okay, well, let me get there and get done. To serve with that purpose and not wasting your time and feeling the compassion, the true whatever you would like done to you, do to the other person.
Right. Right. And for you guys out there and for anybody else, I don't mind the hug. There's personal things to me that I have to get through, like OCD stuff, like,
Right.
oh my gosh, she's getting her tears on me. What if she has a cold? What if she has, I'm hugging somebody with germs and, all this stuff. And she just literally had just lifted a deceased the dog off of the road, and now she's got her arms around me. It's that kind of stuff. Like it goes
Oh
through
yeah,
my head, right? But sometimes we have to get out of our comfort zone. And I know that we talked about, before, when something went wrong in the house and stuff and things go wrong. It's like, if we're a house and let's say that I own the deed to the house, and does it exempt my home from need and work? I'm still probably at some point going to build on. I'm still going to probably refurbish the kitchen. I'm going to, um, add something or do something or decorate something or put in new furniture. My house, just because the house is built, you're in your person, I'm in my person, you're in your person, it does not exempt us the fact that we still have work to do. The problem is some of us rely on the house being built, that they don't want to go any further than just have the aesthetics of 1970, or in my case, I was born in 1965 and grew up in the 70s and 80s. And so if I keep resorting back to, well, that was great years, that was great time, well, that was great, then I'm already finishing the cycle that I'm in, because all I'm doing is looking back.
right.
And I'm not ever living in the now and in the moment. I'm literally negating my moment for the past and not propelling it for the future. And so if you look at your life, if you will, as a home, you don't stop when the house is built. There's things that are constantly changing in that home. You're still getting lights run to it, most people, right? They still have running water at most people. You still got bills. Yeah, you pay light bills, you pay all that. But let's say they come in and they put in a new box or whatever, because there's bigger and better things. They didn't stop in the 1970 power box that's connected to, now they do it from computers half the
Right.
time, right? So if they had always stopped, they would have it. When you stop progressing, it makes things harder. It makes your now harder. If, even though people may not like the box, I get it, all this, radiation and all that stuff that they've got going. Listen, if you got a cell phone, I wouldn't worry about the box on your house. That's the first thing. So, and most of us have cell phones, but that's not a plug for electronics. I'm just telling you, we get so caught up into things that don't matter. God, I'm not good enough. I don't know. I'm just getting so old. But if we look at that, it will overwhelm us. If we look at those types of things, we'll be like defeated before we ever even get to, like, let's say for me, let's just say chapter 59.
Right. Well, the other interesting thing is, not many people know, but before my husband and I retired, I worked for a TV station for 22 years. I was always behind the scenes. This is completely out of my comfort. And when you first asked me to help out, I thought, oh, dear Lord, I can't, this is something I can't do. No, the thing is, it is something I can do. It's almost like I can put on my makeup, I can fix my hair and do all this, but if I stop with the shell and it's
Right.
not in the inside that I, let God use me, then yeah, I may look good on the outside, just like you said, your house, but on the inside is
Right.
where it truly, truly comes from. And like I said, He will take us out of our comfort zone, but it never ever means that He left us.
That's right. And she's learning to cook.
I am. It's a shocker.
So we're going to go ahead and go here, because we won't have enough time if we don't. So what I have done is I've got these I usually use elbow macaronis, but I did another preparation. So in this case, I'm using the bow ties. But again, I would normally use the elbow macaronis. So I have one whole box of this, because I'm going to feed a family with this for Father's Day. And so, which is coming up. I know that it's past when you guys watch it, but when we're recording it. So we've got a family gathering. So I've got an entire box of the, except for the few that I took out, of these little bow ties. And then I have 10 boiled eggs. And when I slice eggs, I know people are like, oh no. But don't do as I do. Honestly, be safe when you're cutting eggs at home. Don't watch me do this. But
That's why
I
she's
wanted
doing
you
it,
to
not me.
see the process. And so basically, I cut these eggs up kind of small, but not too small, but kind of small. And all I'm doing is just putting it in here. And then while I go wash my hands, I'm going to have her add some stuff. This is how I make my macaroni salad.
Okay, so how many?
And so we're going to put a good amount of mayo, because, well, we like mayonnaise in our family.
A lot more than that, right?
Yes. One almost full.
Okay.
Yep, that looks about right.
Okay.
And then we're going to squeeze a little bit of mustard.
Mhm.
We definitely don't put as much mustard as you do
I want to like.
mayonnaise. That's about right.
Okay.
Now we're going to put, I use sweet relish. You can use whatever you want. We don't want a whole lot of juice, but we do want some of the juice. And I want a good amount, almost half a jar.
Okay.
So just go ahead and spoon it out there. Looks about right. Let's try that there. We might add more after we taste it. And then salt and pepper. Here, I'm going to do this because we're going to be peppering it for a minute, I'm pretty sure.
That good salt.
A little bit more.
Now the trick would be me stirring this up without it going on the vinegar.
I use a good amount of salt and pepper. Not a good amount of salt, but a good amount of pepper.
Okay.
And then go ahead and just start stirring it up. Okay. If we look at even, there's so many components to this macaroni salad. Of course, I have to boil the eggs. I have to, of course, prepare the, I didn't cut the pickles to make the relish, but you could if you wanted to. I choose to buy it because it's quicker and easier. But there's a process in it. And through that process, it makes a whole thing, right? And there's so many different things in there. We've got relish, we've got salt, pepper, macaronis, we've got eggs, egg yolk, mayo. Obviously, we've got lots of mayonnaise, but we like a lot of mayonnaise. And then we mix it all up. Every component made that salad. If it's not, it would have just been noodles. If we let us to just be without adding the stuff that God's purposed in us, then we're boring, quite honestly. And the points that I want to make before we close, because we're getting ready to close down the broadcast, but we want to get a little plate and we'll taste it.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about that. We like you said, we're made up of so many different parts, but if we give it all to God and let Him mix all our ingredients together, we turn out to be a beauty that can go and help others do the same.
Yes, it is. We're using clean forks, so don't get on my broadcast and tell us about eating with our forks.
Is it good? Now,
See,
didn't mean to break that.
I have to eat left-handed too, by the way.
That's quite tasty.
Quite tasty. I would put a little more relish
Mm-hmm.
and a little more salt.
And see, for me, I would do like some spices in there, but that's very good.
We're going to put a little more salt and then maybe one little more spoon of relish, and then one more little touch of mayo.
Okay.
Yes. My family, they love their mayo in their salad. They do. So I'll read some of my closing thoughts just before we close, because I know that this took our attention a little bit, but you guys get the concept. You're a work in progress. You're not a failure. Don't confuse unfinished with broken beyond repair. God is still building, He's still refining, and He's still restoring. We can see an old dilapidated house, and somebody can go in there with the right stuff and refurbish that home and make it way more expensive than it was when it cost to build it. He which has begun a good work in you will perform it. God finishes what He starts. And then I we talked a little bit about when Jesus said it was finished. And when He said it was finished, that took care of our healing, that took care of our failures and our faults and all of the stuff that we can throw at like an unfinished work, right? But He said it's finished. We were finished in Him, through Him. The outcome is finished in Him already. But how is he going to finish an outcome if we're not working, if we're not striving for something? The cross finished the work that we couldn't. Healing, forgiveness, victory over the enemy, all of that. It is finished. So while we're still growing, we're growing from victory, not for victory. We already are victorious. We just have to wait for the manifestation of that.
Absolutely.
God's plans for you are good, thoughts of peace and not of evil, like Jeremiah 29 says, right? Not of evil, to give you an expected end. What's the expected end? Glory. That's the expected end. Not disaster, not ruin. God's not writing a tragedy. He's writing a testimony. We hope that you have a good day. We hope that you've enjoyed our macaroni salad vicariously through us. Y'all have a great day on purpose.